The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the cramped VFW Post 847 meeting hall, casting harsh shadows across worn linoleum floors that had seen better decades. In the corner, near a faded American flag whose colors had dulled from years of cigarette smoke and time, sat a man who didn't belong. At least, that's what everyone in the room had decided. His name was Ray Mitchell, and in exactly 47 minutes, the people trying to throw him out would discover they'd made the single biggest mistake in the 68-year history of this Veterans of Foreign Wars post. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Tuesday evening meeting of VFW Post 847 in Millbrook, Pennsylvania, was supposed to be routine. The post commander, Derek Hastings, a former Army staff sergeant who'd served a single deployment in Afghanistan, sat at the head table shuffling through paperwork with the self-important air of a man who'd finally found a kingdom small enough to rule. At 42 years old, Derek was younger than most of the post's membership, and he wore that youth like armor. His polo shirt was crisp, embroidered with his rank and service dates. His haircut was fresh, high and tight, maintained with the fervor of a man clinging to his identity. He'd been post commander for 3 years, and in that time he'd modernized everything. New website, social media presence, updated bylaws, and most importantly, strict membership verification protocols. "We need to maintain standards," he'd told the membership at last month's meeting, his voice carrying the rehearsed cadence of someone who'd practiced the speech in his mirror. "This isn't just some social club. This is the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Emphasis on veterans. Emphasis on foreign wars. We've had too many guys showing up here claiming service they can't verify, drinking our beer, using our facilities. It ends now." The membership had nodded along. It made sense. They'd all earned their place here through sacrifice and service. Why shouldn't they protect that? Ray Mitchell had walked into Post 847 for the first time about 20 minutes before the meeting started. He'd arrived without fanfare, driving a 20-year-old Ford pickup truck with primer spots on the fender and a faded bumper sticker that simply read, "Remember." He wore faded blue jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and a Vietnam veteran's cap that had seen so many years the bill had started to crack. He was 78 years old, though he moved with the careful deliberation of someone older. His face was deeply lined, weathered like old leather left too long in the sun. His hands, resting on the cafeteria-style table, were scarred, not just the normal nicks and cuts of age, but patterned scars, the kind that told stories to anyone who knew how to read them. He'd approached the bar area where Charlie Brennan, the post's adjutant and self-appointed gatekeeper, was setting up for the evening. "Help you?" Charlie had asked, not looking up from the beer taps he was checking. "Heard you folks meet on Tuesdays. Thought I might sit in, if that's all right." Charlie had looked up then, taking in the stranger with a practiced evaluating gaze. Vietnam cap, no post affiliations visible. No pins, no patches, no unit identifications. Just an old guy in civilian clothes. "You a member?" Charlie asked. "Not of this post. Just moved to the area. Staying with my daughter about 10 miles up Route 19. "You'll need to fill out an application," Charlie said, pulling a clipboard from under the bar. "Membership's not automatic. We verify service records, DD-214s, deployment documentation. Commander's pretty strict about it." Ray had nodded slowly, accepting the clipboard. "That's fine. Good, actually. Should be that way." He'd found a seat in the back corner, away from the clusters of men who clearly knew each other, who'd built their social networks over years of shared meetings, fish fries, and memorial services. He sat quietly, filling out the application with careful, cramped handwriting, occasionally pausing as if the act of writing itself required significant effort. The meeting was called to order at 7 o'clock sharp. Derek Hastings rapped his gavel with unnecessary force, and the dozen men scattered around the hall quieted down. "All right, gentlemen, let's get started," Derek announced. "We've got a full agenda tonight. First order of business, treasurer's report, then we need to discuss the Memorial Day Planning Committee, and finally we've got the application review." The meeting droned on through financial reports, arguments about whether we could afford new bar stools, and a heated debate about whether the annual fish fry should switch from cod to haddock. Ray sat quietly in his corner, not participating, just observing with those patient, distant eyes. It was during the application review that everything changed. "We've got one new application tonight," Derek announced. Picking up the clipboard Charlie handed him. His eyes scanned the form, and almost immediately his expression shifted from routine boredom to active suspicion. "Ray Mitchell," he read out loud, his tone already skeptical. "Vietnam-era veteran." He looked up, scanning the room. "Mr. Mitchell, you here?" Ray raised his hand slightly, a small gesture that barely cleared the table. Derek's eyes locked onto him, and there was something in that gaze, a mixture of territorial defensiveness and preemptive judgment. Here was an outsider, an unknown quantity, entering his carefully controlled domain. "Says here you were in Vietnam," Derek continued, his voice taking on an edge. "What unit?" "I was with Mac V. SOG," Ray said simply. "Studies and Observations Group." A few of the older members shifted in their seats. Those who knew their history recognized the acronym, Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, Studies and Observations Group. The most classified, most dangerous operations of the entire war. But Derek Hastings, whose knowledge of Vietnam came primarily from documentaries and Wikipedia, heard only the vague, unofficial-sounding name. "Mac V. SOG?" he repeated, his tone making it clear he found the answer insufficient. "That's pretty vague, Mr. Mitchell. What was your MOS, your rank? Where's your DD-214? "Don't have it with me," Ray said. "It's in storage with my daughter. I can bring it next week." "That's convenient," Derek said, and a few members chuckled. Not mean-spirited yet, but testing the waters, following their commander's lead. "See, Mr. Mitchell, we get guys coming through here all the time with stories. Vietnam vet, special forces, classified missions. It's always classified, isn't it? Always something that can't be verified." Ray's expression didn't change. He simply looked at Derek with those calm, unreadable eyes. "I can verify it," he said quietly. "Just need to get my paperwork." "Or," Derek said, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won, "maybe you're one of these stolen valor guys. Maybe you read some books, watched some movies, bought a cap at a surplus store, and figured you'd get some free beers and handshakes." The room went quiet. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Ray Mitchell didn't flinch. He didn't defend himself. He didn't raise his voice. He simply sat there, absorbing the insult with the same patient stillness he'd shown all evening. "I served," and there was no anger in his voice, no indignation, just a simple statement of fact. "Then prove it," Derek shot back. "Right now. Tell me something specific. What operations were you on? What firebase? What province? Give me names, dates. Something concrete." The silence stretched. Ray looked down at his scarred hands, and for just a moment something flickered across his face. Not fear, not shame, but a deep, profound weariness. "Some things," he said slowly, "aren't easy to talk about." "That's what they all say," Derek snapped. He looked around the room, playing to his audience. "Gentlemen, this is exactly what I've been warning you about. These people, they prey on our respect for veterans. They steal our honor, our stories, our sacrifices, and I won't have it, not in my post." He turned back to Ray, and his voice dropped to something cold and final. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm denying your application. Furthermore, as post commander, I'm asking you to leave these premises immediately. You're not welcome here."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Ray Mitchell didn't move immediately. He sat there for a long moment, his weathered hands still resting on the table, his eyes fixed on some distant point that only he could see. It was as if Derek Hastings' words had to travel a great distance to reach him, passing through decades and memories before finally arriving. "Sir," Ray said finally, his voice still that same quiet rumble, "I mean no disrespect to you, or anyone here. I just wanted to be around folks who understand." "Understand what?" Derek shot back, standing now, his chair scraping loudly against the linoleum. "Maybe we should just—" "No," Derek cut him off, sharply. "Tom, this is exactly the problem. We're too soft. We give people the benefit of the doubt, and they take advantage. Look at him." He gestured at Ray dismissively. "No unit patches, no pins, no documentation, just a generic Vietnam cap anyone can buy online and a story about some mysterious classified unit. It's textbook stolen valor." Margus Webb, the Post's vice commander and a Marine Corps veteran who'd done 2 tours in Iraq, leaned forward. He was a large man, barrel-chested, with a neck like a tree trunk and hands that looked like they could crush walnuts. Unlike Derek, Marcus didn't lead with his rank. He led with his presence. "What years were you in Vietnam?" Marcus asked Ray, his tone more measured than Derek's, but still skeptical. 67 to 69, Ray said. 2 tours. "And you were with Mac V. Sog both times?" Ray nodded slowly. He exchanged a glance with Derek. "That's a pretty elite unit, supposedly. One of those things that was so secret it didn't officially exist. Convenient for someone making up a story. Can verify something that doesn't exist in the public record." "It exists," Ray said quietly. "Just took 'em 30 years to declassify it." "Right," Derek interjected, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "And I'm sure your records were all lost in a fire, or they're still classified, or some other excuse that means we just have to take your word for it." He walked around the table, positioning himself between Ray and the door, his body language aggressive, territorial. The younger members of the Post watched with a mixture of fascination and discomfort. This was their commander, their leader, protecting their sacred space. But something about the old man's quiet dignity made the scene feel wrong, like watching someone kick a dog that had done nothing to deserve it. "I've dealt with guys like you before. You know what burns me up? Real Vietnam vets. Guys who actually were there, who actually saw combat, they're dying off. Every day we lose more of them. And parasites like you swoop in, wearing their honor like a costume, collecting their respect like welfare checks."
"I'm not collecting anything," he said, and for the first time there was an edge to his voice, sharp as broken glass. "I came here because my daughter thought it would be good for me to be around other veterans. That's all." "Your daughter," Derek laughed, and it was an ugly sound. "Let me guess. She doesn't know you're a fraud either? Does she think her old man is a war hero? Does she tell her friends about her dad, the Special Forces veteran?" "Leave my daughter out of this," Ray said, and now he was standing, moving with a speed that belied his age. He wasn't threatening, wasn't aggressive, but there was something in the way he rose, smooth, controlled, ready, that made several men in the room suddenly reassess him. Derek noticed it too, and it made him angrier. He'd expected capitulation, expected the old man to slink away ashamed. Instead, he was getting resistance. "Or what?" Derek challenged, stepping closer. "What are you going to do, old man? You going to show me some of those super-secret ninja moves they taught you in your imaginary Special Forces unit?" "Derek," Tom Kowalski said again, more forcefully this time, "that's enough. Even if he can't verify tonight, there's no call for this." "Stay out of this, Tom," Derek snapped, without looking away from Ray. "This is about integrity. This is about protecting what we've built here." Charlie Brennan, the adjutant who'd first greeted Ray, had been watching the exchange with growing unease. He'd seen his share of stolen valor cases,
Guys who showed up claiming ranks they'd never held, medals they'd never earned, combat experience that never happened. They usually fell apart under questioning, their stories changing, their details fuzzy. But Ray Mitchell hadn't changed his story. He hadn't elaborated or exaggerated. He just stated simple facts and then gone quiet when pushed. That wasn't typical behavior for a faker. "Commander," Charlie said carefully, "maybe we could table this until next week. Let him bring his DD-214, verify his service record, and then—" "No," Derek said flatly. "He leaves now, tonight. I'm not waiting a week for him to go online and forge some documents. I'm not giving him time to get his story straight." He turned to address the full membership, his voice taking on that rehearsed quality again, like he was delivering a prepared statement. "Gentlemen, we have bylaws for a reason. We have standards for a reason. If we let this slide, if we make exceptions, we might as well open these doors to anyone who wants to walk in off the street. What's next? High school kids doing research papers? History buffs who want to hear war stories? Homeless guys looking for free coffee?" The comparison was deliberate, calculated to dehumanize Ray, to transform him from a potential brother-in-arms to an intruder, a threat. Ray reached down slowly and picked up his cap from the table. He handled it carefully like it was made of something more fragile than fabric and thread. His fingers traced the embroidered text, "Vietnam Veteran," and for just a moment, his eyes closed. When he opened them again, he looked at Derek Hastings with something that might have been pity. "You don't know what you're doing, son." "Don't call me son," Derek spat. "You didn't earn that right." Ray nodded slowly, accepting the rebuke. He moved toward the door, and the men between him and the exit parted like a curtain. None of them quite willing to physically stop him, but none willing to defend him either. He'd almost reached the door when Marcus Webb spoke up again. "Just so you know, the Post bylaws require a membership vote to deny an application. Commander can't just unilaterally kick someone out." "He's not a member, Marcus. He's a visitor who's been asked to leave. That's within my authority." "That's a gray area," Marcus countered. "He filled out an application. Until that application is formally voted on, then let's vote," Derek interrupted. He turned back to the room. "All in favor of denying Ray Mitchell's application for membership on grounds of suspected stolen valor, say aye." "Derek, we can't vote without proper investigation," Tom started. "Aye," Derek shouted, his voice drowning out the objection. There was a long, uncomfortable pause. Then one by one, hands started to rise. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough. 9 hands out of 14 members present. Derek smiled triumphantly. "Motion carries. Mr. Mitchell, you've been formally denied. You need to leave or I'll call the police and have you removed for trespassing." Ray looked at those raised hands, at the faces of men who decided he was lying without ever really listening. He looked at the ones who hadn't voted, who sat there with their hands in their laps and shame in their eyes, but who hadn't spoken up. "All right," he said simply. "I'll go." He pushed open the door, and the cool October evening air rushed in, carrying with it the smell of fallen leaves and distant rain. He paused in the doorway, backlit by the parking lot's security light, his silhouette thin and fragile. "For what it's worth," he said without turning around, "I understand why you did this. You're trying to protect something you value. That's honorable in its way." Then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than any gavel. Inside Post 847, Derek Hastings straightened his papers, his hands shaking slightly with adrenaline. He'd won. He'd protected his post, maintained standards, refused to compromise. He had done exactly what a leader was supposed to do. So why did victory taste like ashes in his mouth? Why did Tom Kowalski refuse to meet his eyes? Why did Marcus Webb shake his head slowly, disappointment written across his broad features? And why, in the corner where Ray Mitchell had been sitting, did the empty chair suddenly look like an accusation? The parking lot of VFW Post 847 was nearly empty. Just a handful of vehicles scattered across the cracked asphalt that the Post membership had been promising to repave for 3 years. Ray Mitchell's old Ford pickup sat under the yellow glow of a streetlight, alone in the far corner where he'd parked it, away from the newer trucks and SUVs clustered near the entrance. He walked slowly toward it, his boots crunching on loose gravel, his Vietnam cap pulled low. The October wind had picked up, rustling through the oak trees that bordered the property, sending dried leaves skittering across the pavement like whispered conversations. Ray reached his truck and stood there for a moment, his hand on the door handle, not opening it. He was looking at something no one else could see, a memory superimposed over the present, the way old soldiers sometimes do when the past becomes more real than the present. Inside the hall, the meeting had dissolved into uncomfortable clusters. The formal agenda was forgotten. Derek Hastings stood at the head table, trying to regain control, but the energy had shifted. The room felt different now, charged with something that hadn't been there before. Doubt, perhaps, or guilt, or the creeping realization that something irreversible had just occurred. Tom Kowalski, the Desert Storm veteran who'd tried to speak up, grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. He was 61 years old, a retired postal worker who'd served in the Army's 1st Infantry Division during the Gulf War. He joined Post 847 15 years ago and had never seen anything quite like what had just happened. "Tom, where are you going?" Derek called out, trying to sound authoritative but achieving only defensive. "We still have business to cover." "I'm done for tonight," Tom said flatly, not looking back. "We haven't adjourned." "Then adjourn it," Tom said, turning to face Derek. His expression was hard, closed off. "Or don't. I don't care, but I'm not sitting here celebrating what we just did." "Celebrating?" Derek's voice rose. "We protected this post from what, Derek? From an old man who wanted to sit quietly in the back and be around other veterans? You didn't protect anything tonight. You just made us all smaller." He walked out, the door closing behind him with more force than necessary. Derek looked around the room, seeking support, validation, anything to confirm he'd done the right thing. Most of the men avoided his gaze. A few nodded, but even those nods looked uncertain, obligatory. Marcus Webb, the Marine Corps veteran and vice commander, hadn't moved from his seat. His massive arms were folded across his chest, and he was staring at Derek with an expression that was difficult to read. Not quite anger, not quite disappointment, but something that combined both with a measure of professional assessment. "You got something to say, Marcus?" Derek asked, his tone carrying a challenge. "Yeah, I think we might have just made a serious mistake." He couldn't verify his service. He had no documentation, no proof, nothing but a story about some secret unit that... "MacVSOG wasn't a story," Marcus interrupted. "It was real. It was probably the most dangerous assignment in Vietnam. Those guys did cross-border operations into Laos and Cambodia, deep reconnaissance, prisoner snatches, stuff that didn't officially happen because it couldn't officially happen." Derek waved his hand dismissively. "Anyone can read that on Wikipedia, Marcus. Knowing the name of a unit doesn't make you a member of it." "No," Marcus agreed. "But you know what? Real fakers, the guys who actually steal valor, they don't usually claim units like MacVSOG. They claim easier stuff. Infantry divisions, artillery units, things that are documented and verifiable. The guys making up stories want attention, want people impressed. They pick famous units, Medal of Honor stuff, special forces with a capital S." He leaned forward, his chair creaking under his weight. "That old man didn't want attention, Derek. He sat in the back. He didn't wear a unit patch or a chest full of pins. He didn't tell war stories or name-drop famous battles. He just wanted to be here. That's not faker behavior." "Then where was his DD-214? Derek countered. "If he's legitimate, why didn't he bring documentation?" because he's 78 years old and just moved to the area and probably didn't think he'd need to defend his entire life story at a Tuesday night VFW meeting, Marcus said, his voice harder now, because maybe he thought veterans would give another veteran the benefit of the doubt for 1 week while he got his paperwork together. Charlie Brennan, still behind the bar, spoke up quietly. I looked at his hands while he was filling out the application. They had scars. Not random scars, patterned ones, the kind you get from specific types of injuries over and over. Rope scars on the wrists, old burns on the palms. The room had gone silent now, everyone listening. And his eyes, Charlie continued, not looking at anyone in particular, just staring at the bar top. I've been tending bar here for 12 years. I've seen a lot of veterans. I know the difference between someone who's seen combat and someone who hasn't. That old man had the eyes. The eyes? One of the younger members asked. The 1,000-yard stare, Tom Kowalski said, from near the door. He hadn't left after all, just stood there listening. It's what happens when you've seen things you can't unsee, when part of you is still back there in the shit, even decades later. You can't fake that. You can't learn it from a movie.
Derek felt the room slipping away from him, felt his authority crumbling. He'd been so certain, so confident in his judgment. But now, with every word spoken, that certainty developed cracks. We did what we had to do, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. We followed the bylaws. We protected the integrity of this post. Did we? Marcus stood, his full height impressive even in the low ceiling tall. Or did we just become the kind of organization that kicks out the very people we exist to serve? What's the point of a VFW if actual veterans don't feel welcome? Outside, Tom Kowalski had made his way across the parking lot. He'd intended to go to his car, to drive home and try to forget this whole ugly evening. But something made him stop. He saw Ray Mitchell's truck, still parked, still occupied. The old man was sitting in the driver's seat, not moving, just sitting there in the dark. Tom tapped gently on the window. Ray looked up, startled, then rolled down the window manually. The old truck didn't have power windows. "I'm sorry," Tom said simply. "What happened in there? It wasn't right." Ray studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You voted against it, I saw." "For what that's worth," Tom said bitterly. "Wasn't enough to stop it. You spoke up. That's more than most did." Ray's voice was quiet but steady. "That takes courage too. Different kind, but still courage." They sat in silence for a moment, an older veteran standing in a parking lot talking to an elderly one through a truck window. The absurdity of it wasn't lost on either one of them. "Mac VSOG," Tom said. "My uncle was in Vietnam. Regular infantry, 25th Division. He used to talk about hearing stories, just rumors really, about these guys who'd show up and disappear, who went places nobody else went. Said they were either the bravest men alive or completely insane, and probably both." Ray's lips quirked in something that might have been a smile. "Your uncle was a wise man." He also said they had the highest casualty rate of any unit in the war. Said for every guy who came back, 3 didn't. Ray didn't respond to that. His hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles whitening. Tom noticed and changed the subject. "You're staying with your daughter?" "Sarah. She's a nurse at Millbrook Medical Center. Lost her husband 2 years ago, cancer. She's got 2 kids, working double shifts. I came up from Florida to help out, watch the grandkids after school, that kind of thing." "It's good of you." Ray shrugged. "She's my daughter. It's what you do." "Listen," Tom said, pulling out his phone. "Can I get your number? When you get your DD-214, I want to help you resubmit your application. What Derek did tonight, that's not how this post usually operates. Most of us are better than that." Ray looked at the phone, then at Tom's earnest face. "I appreciate that, but I don't think I'll be coming back. I don't need the conflict. Life's too short for that kind of stress." "But you deserve. I deserve a quiet place to live out my time with my daughter and grandkids. That's all I need. The VFW, the recognition,
The brotherhood? I had that once, a long time ago. Most of those brothers are gone now. I was just hoping to find a little piece of that again, but maybe that was foolish. Maybe some things should stay in the past. Tom felt something break inside his chest, a sharp pain that had nothing to do with physical injury. Here was a man who had served his country in ways Tom couldn't imagine, who had survived things that killed 3 out of 4 of his comrades, who had carried those memories for 50-plus years, and he was apologizing for trying to find a place to belong. "It's not foolish," Tom said fiercely, "and you shouldn't have to prove anything to anyone. We should have welcomed you. We should have trusted you. That's what veterans do for each other." Ray reached out through the window and gripped Tom's shoulder, a brief squeeze of acknowledgement and gratitude. Then he started his truck, the engine turning over with a rattling cough that spoke of many miles and deferred maintenance. "Take care of yourself, Tom Kowalski." "Wait, how did you know my name?" "I introduced myself at the start of the meeting, during roll call. I was listening. I heard all your names." And with that, he drove away, his taillights disappearing into the October darkness, leaving Tom standing alone in the parking lot, with the terrible weight of collective failure pressing down on his shoulders. The drive home took Ray Mitchell through the quiet streets of Millbrook, Pennsylvania, a small Pennsylvania town that had seen better days. Empty storefronts lined Main Street, their windows dark and dusty. The old movie theater had been converted into a church. The diner where workers from the now-closed steel mill used to gather was boarded up, graffiti crawling across the plywood like vines. Ray had seen this pattern before in dozens of small towns across America. Places that had thrived once, that had sent their sons off to war with parades and flags, and then slowly faded as industries dried up and young people moved away chasing opportunities that no longer existed here.
His daughter Sarah lived in a modest ranch house on Maple Avenue, a tree-lined street where Halloween decorations were already appearing on porches. Plastic skeletons, inflatable ghosts, carved pumpkins with flickering LED candles inside. Normal life. Peaceful life. The kind of life that Ray had fought to preserve, even if the people living it never knew his name. The house was dark, except for the porch light Sarah always left on for him. She'd be asleep by now. She had the early shift at the hospital, starting at 5 in the morning. The kids, Tyler and Emma, would be asleep too, dreaming whatever 10- and 12-year-olds dreamed about. School, friends, video games, innocent things. Ray let himself in quietly, hung his cap on the hook by the door, and stood in the small foyer for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness. The house smelled like the dinner he'd missed. Spaghetti, probably, Sarah's go-to meal when she was working late. There were school pictures on the walls, Tyler's baseball trophies on a shelf, Emma's artwork held to the refrigerator with magnets. This was why he'd served. Not for glory, not for recognition. For this. For ordinary families living ordinary lives in safety, never knowing how much blood had been spilled to make that ordinariness possible. He moved through the house to the spare bedroom that Sarah had set up for him. It was small, barely larger than a storage room, with a single bed, a dresser, and a closet. But it was clean and warm, and it was family. And that was more than enough. In the closet, on the top shelf behind some boxes of old clothes Sarah kept meaning to donate, was a military footlocker. Green metal, battered and scarred, with Mitchell, R, stenciled on the side in faded white letters. Ray hadn't opened it in years, hadn't needed to. The contents were seared into his memory anyway. But now, standing in the dark bedroom with the accusation of stolen valor still ringing in his ears, he felt the pull of it, the need to touch proof, to remind himself that it had been real, that he hadn't imagined it all. He pulled the footlocker down carefully, quietly, not wanting to wake anyone.
It was heavier than it looked, and his arms shook slightly as he lowered it to the floor. The lock was a simple combination dial, and his fingers remembered the sequence even after all these years. 170967. The date of his first mission into Laos. Inside the footlocker was organized with military precision. His dress uniform, carefully folded and preserved in plastic. His DD-214 discharge papers in a waterproof envelope. A handful of photographs, their colors faded to yellow and blue. Letters from home, from his mother who'd been dead now for 30 years. A green beret, worn and sweat-stained. Dog tags on a beaded chain. And at the bottom, wrapped in an old OD green t-shirt, a black leather box about the size of a paperback book. Ray lifted it out, his hands steady despite the tremor that had been getting worse over the past year. The box was unmarked, unadorned. He opened it slowly, the hinges creaking slightly. Inside, on a bed of faded blue velvet, lay a medal. The Medal of Honor. America's highest military decoration. The 5-pointed star suspended from a light blue ribbon dotted with 13 white stars. Ray stared at it for a long moment, not with pride, but with a complex mixture of emotions. Grief, survivor's guilt, the weight of memory. He hadn't earned this alone. 6 men had gone into that valley in Cambodia. Only he had come out. The medal wasn't his achievement, it was their sacrifice. He closed the box and set it aside. Beneath the uniform and medals were the photographs. Ray picked up one, holding it up to catch the thin moonlight coming through the window. 5 men in tiger-stripe fatigues, their faces smeared with camouflage paint, standing in front of a helicopter. They were impossibly young, none older than 25. They held weapons with casual familiarity. CR-15s, Swedish K submachine guns, captured AK-47s. Their eyes were hard, alert, already marked by things they'd seen. Second from the left was Ray Mitchell, 23 years old, lean and dangerous. Next to him was his team leader, Staff Sergeant James Holbrook from Dallas, Texas, a man who could navigate by the stars, who spoke fluent Vietnamese and passable Lao, who never raised his voice and never had to. On Ray's other side was Billy Chen, the radio man, Chinese-American kid from San Francisco who could fix anything electronic and told jokes to break the tension before every mission. Those 2 men were dead now. Holbrook, killed in 1968 during an extraction gone wrong. Chen died in 1969, shot through the neck during an ambush in the Ashau Valley. The other 2 in the photo, Ray didn't even know. They'd been replacements, arrived to fill slots left by previous casualties, and had themselves been killed before Ray learned much about them beyond their names. That was the nature of MAC-VSOG. You didn't make friends, you made brothers, fast and fierce, because you might only have days or weeks together before death came calling. And it always came calling, eventually. Ray put the photograph back, closed the footlocker, and pushed it back into the closet. He lay down on the bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling in the darkness, and tried not to think about VFW Post 847, or Derek Hastings' accusing voice, or the way those men had looked at him like he was a criminal. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, memories did.
Derek Hastings stayed late, ostensibly to file paperwork, but really because he couldn't bear to go home yet. His wife would ask how the meeting went, and he'd have to lie or explain, and he didn't want to do either. So he sat at the commander's desk in the small office off the main hall, staring at Ray Mitchell's half-completed application. The handwriting was shaky but precise. The letters formed carefully by someone whose hands didn't work as well as they once had. Service dates, 1966, 1970. Branch, U.S. Army. Unit,
MACV SOG, duty stations, Vietnam, classified locations, awards. The line had been left blank. That blank line bothered Derek more than he wanted to admit. Every veteran he knew, himself included, filled in that line eagerly. It was validation, proof of service, the tangible evidence of sacrifice. Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Army Commendation Medal, even the simple National Defense Service Medal that everyone got just for serving during wartime. But Ray Mitchell had left it blank. Why would someone fabricating a service record fail to list fake medals? Why would a stolen valor case pass up the opportunity to claim recognition? Derek's phone buzzed. A text from his wife. Meeting run late, dinner's cold. He ignored it, instead opening his laptop and navigating to Google. He typed MACV SOG Veterans. The search results were extensive. Historical articles, declassified documents, memorial websites, veteran reunion information. Derek clicked on a link to the Special Operations Association, an organization for former MACV SOG members. The website had a memorial page, names and photographs of men killed in action. Derek scrolled through them, dozens upon dozens of names, most with the dates 1967 to 1972. The casualty rate was staggering. According to the site, MACV SOG units had casualty rates exceeding 100% in some years, meaning a unit would lose more men than it had slots through death, injury, and rotation. Another click brought up a documentary excerpt he'd never seen before. A former MACV SOG operator, now in his 70s, being interviewed about his service. The man spoke slowly, carefully, as if each word cost him something. "We don't talk about it much," the veteran said on screen, his eyes distant. "Not because it's classified anymore. Most of it's been declassified. We don't talk about it because nobody really wants to hear it. The things we did, the things we saw, it's not the kind of war story people want at barbecues. It's not heroic. It's just dark. So we keep it to ourselves. We carry it alone." Derek closed the laptop abruptly, the veteran's words hitting too close to home. The office suddenly felt too small, too quiet, too full of the ghosts of his own certainty. His phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't his wife, it was Marcus Webb. "Call me when you get this. We need to talk about tonight." Derek stared at the message for a long time before setting the phone face down on the desk. He knew what Marcus wanted to talk about. He knew what they all wanted to talk about. And deep down, in a place he didn't want to acknowledge, Derek Hastings was beginning to suspect that he'd made a terrible, irreversible mistake. But admitting that would mean admitting he'd been wrong. Wrong in front of his post membership. Wrong in his judgment. Wrong in his leadership. And Derek Hastings had built his entire identity around being right. So, instead of calling Marcus back, instead of reaching out to Tom Kowalski, instead of doing the hard work of questioning his own decisions, Derek Hastings turned off his phone, locked up the Post, and drove home through the same October darkness that had swallowed Ray Mitchell's taillights an hour before. The difference was that Derek drove home angry, defensive, righteous. Ray Mitchell had driven home sad, disappointed, and utterly unsurprised. He'd seen this pattern before, in different forms over decades. People protecting their small kingdoms, people choosing certainty over truth, people confusing volume with authority. It was one of the many reasons he'd left the service in the first place and spent 50 years trying to forget he'd ever been a soldier at all. Sarah Mitchell Brenner woke at 4:30 in the morning the way she had for the past 8 years of working hospital shifts. Her alarm hadn't even gone off yet. Her body just knew. She moved quietly through the house, not wanting to wake the kids or her father. But when she passed the spare bedroom, she noticed the door was slightly ajar and the light was on. She pushed it open gently and found her father sitting on the edge of the bed, still fully dressed in the clothes he'd worn the night before, staring at an open footlocker on the floor. "Dad?" she said softly. "Are you okay?" Ray looked up, and Sarah saw something in his face that alarmed her. Not pain exactly, not sadness, but a kind of distant exhaustion that seemed to radiate from somewhere deep inside him. "Couldn't sleep," he said simply. Sarah sat down beside him on the bed, the mattress dipping under her weight. She was 46 years old, with her father's steady eyes and her late mother's dark hair now showing threads of gray. She'd been a trauma nurse for 2 decades, and she'd learned to read people, to see past what they said to what they meant. "What happened last night? You left for the VFW around 6:30? You seemed hopeful." Ray was quiet for a long moment, his gnarled hands resting on his knees. "It didn't work out," he said finally. "They didn't want me there." "What do you mean they didn't want you there? It's a veterans organization. You're a veteran." "I couldn't verify my service on the spot. They thought I was lying. Thought I was one of those stolen valor people."
Sarah's expression shifted from concern to anger in an instant. "Are you serious? Did you tell them who you are? Did you tell them what you did?" "I told them what unit I was in. That wasn't enough." "Dad," Sarah said, her voice tight with frustration, "you have a Medal of Honor in that box. You have a DD-214 that's probably more decorated than everyone in that post combined. Why didn't you just—" "Because I shouldn't have to," Ray interrupted quietly. "If a man tells you he served, you give him the benefit of the doubt. You don't make him prove his pain. You don't make him justify his scars." He looked at his daughter, his eyes suddenly vulnerable in a way she rarely saw. "I didn't go there to show off medals, Sarah. I went there to sit quietly with other people who understand what it's like to have pieces of yourself stuck in places you can't go back to." Sarah felt her throat tighten. Her father never talked like this, never spoke openly about Vietnam, about what he'd experienced, about the weight he carried. She'd grown up knowing he was a veteran, knowing he'd done something important, but the details had always been locked away in silence. She'd only learned about the Medal of Honor when she was 16, and only then because a high school history teacher had been researching local veterans and found her father's name in military archives. When she'd asked him about it, Ray had simply said, "That was a long time ago," and changed the subject. "I'm going back there," Sarah said, standing up, her nurse's determination kicking in. "I'm going to that post, and I'm going to tell them exactly who they kicked out." "No," Ray said firmly. "You're not. This isn't worth the conflict. I'm fine, Sarah. I don't need their recognition." "But you deserve their respect." "Respect isn't demanded, honey. It's earned or it's nothing." He reached out and took her hand. "Promise me you'll let this go. I've got everything I need right here. You, Tyler, Emma. That's enough." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to fight for her father the way he'd fought for his country, but she saw the exhaustion in his face and made a different decision. "Okay," she said softly. "I won't go there, but I'm not happy about it." "I know," Ray said with a slight smile. "You get that from your mother. She never let anything go either." After Sarah left for her shift, Ray finally managed to sleep for a few hours. When he woke, it was the sound of his grandchildren getting ready for school, the thunder of footsteps, the bang of cabinet doors, the argument over who got to use the bathroom first. These sounds, chaotic and ordinary, were the antidote to the silence of the night. This was what mattered. Not the opinions of strangers at a VFW hall, but the living, breathing present of family. Meanwhile, across town, Tom Kowalski hadn't slept well either. He'd lain awake most of the night, replaying the scene at Post 847, seeing Ray Mitchell's quiet dignity in the face of Derek's accusations,
remembering the old man's scarred hands and distant eyes. At 7 in the morning, Tom made a decision. He picked up his phone and dialed Marcus Webb. "We need to do something about last night," Tom said, without preamble, when Marcus answered. "I know," Marcus replied. His voice was rough, like he hadn't slept either. "I've been thinking about it all night. Derek was out of line." "It was more than out of line, Marcus. It was wrong. That old man served. I know it in my gut. And we threw him out like he was garbage." There was a pause on the line. "What do you want to do?" "I want to find him. I want to apologize properly. And I want to help him get his application approved, whether Derek likes it or not." "Derek's the post commander. He can block it." "Then maybe Derek shouldn't be post commander anymore," Tom said, and the words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "That's a serious thing you're suggesting." "I know, but I'm done with following leaders who've forgotten what service actually means. Are you with me or not?" Another pause, then, "I'm with you. Let me make some calls. I know a guy at the VA who might be able to help us track down Mitchell's records. If he served with MacVSOG, there will be documentation, even if it was classified. Most of that stuff got declassified in the 90s. "Good," Tom said. "Call me when you know something." But Marcus Webb wasn't just calling the VA. He was also calling someone else, someone he'd served with in Iraq, who'd gone on to work in veteran services at the Department of Defense. If Ray Mitchell was who Marcus suspected he might be, there would be people who knew his name. Important people. At Post 847, Derek Hastings arrived mid-morning to find an unexpected visitor waiting in the parking lot. A silver sedan with government plates was parked near the entrance, and leaning against it was a woman in her early 50s wearing a navy blazer and slacks. She had close-cropped gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent time in uniform. "Derek Hastings," she called out as he approached. "That's me. Can I help you?" She pulled out a credentials case and flipped it open. "Janet Rosario, Veterans of Foreign Wars National Headquarters, Department of Inspector General. I need to speak with you about an incident that occurred at this post last night." Derek felt his stomach drop. "I'm sorry, what? Inspector General?" "A complaint was filed early this morning regarding the treatment of a prospective member. I'm here to conduct a preliminary inquiry." Her voice was professional, clipped, offering no warmth or hostility, just facts. "A complaint? By who?" "That's confidential. May we go inside?" Derek unlocked the post with shaking hands, his mind racing. Who would have filed a complaint? Tom? Marcus? One of the other members who'd been there? Inside, Janet Rosario took a seat at one of the tables and pulled out a tablet. "Tell me what happened last night with applicant Ray Mitchell." Derek sat across from her, trying to compose himself, trying to find the words that would make his actions sound reasonable and justified. "We had an applicant who couldn't verify his service. He claimed to be with a unit, MACVSOG, but had no documentation, no DD-214, nothing. I made the decision to deny his application and ask him to leave based on suspected stolen valor." "Suspected stolen valor," Rosario repeated, typing notes. "Based on what specific evidence?" "Based on the fact that he had no proof," Derek said, his voice rising slightly. "No documentation, no unit patches, no—" "Did you conduct any verification yourself before making this accusation? Did you check military databases, contact the National Archives, reach out to MACVSOG Veterans Associations?" Derek hesitated. "No, but did you give Mr. Mitchell the standard 30-day period to provide documentation as outlined in VFW bylaws for membership applications?" "The situation was... It's a yes or no question, Mr. Hastings." "No," Derek admitted. "I didn't." Rosario made another note. Did you, at any point during this interaction, use derogatory language toward Mr. Mitchell? Suggest he was a janitor, a fraud, or question his mental competence? Derek felt sweat beginning to form on his brow. Someone had been taking very detailed notes. I may have been forceful in my questioning, but I was protecting the integrity of... Were you aware, Rosario interrupted again, her voice taking on a sharp edge for the first time, that Ray Mitchell is a Medal of Honor recipient? That he holds 3 Distinguished Service Crosses? That his classified service record, once declassified, showed 23 cross-border operations into denied territory, 7 of which resulted in his team taking casualties, and 1 of which resulted in him being the sole survivor? The color drained from Derek's face. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Were you aware, Rosario continued, her words precise and cutting, that Mr. Mitchell's name appears on 17 classified patents related to special operations equipment? That he personally saved the lives of 3 downed pilots during his service? That when his story was finally declassified in 1995, the Secretary of Defense at the time called him one of the most decorated and least recognized heroes of the Vietnam War? Derek couldn't speak. His mouth opened, but no words came out. And were you aware, Rosario said, leaning forward, that Mr. Mitchell has spent the past 50 years refusing every interview, declining every invitation to speak publicly, and avoiding recognition specifically because he doesn't want attention or glory? That he only applied to your post because his daughter thought being around other veterans might help with what we'd now call PTSD, but what he's been dealing with alone for half a century? The silence in the hall was absolute. No, Derek finally whispered. I didn't know. No, Rosario agreed. You didn't. Because you didn't ask. You didn't verify. You didn't give him the basic courtesy that one veteran owes another. Instead, you publicly humiliated a man who has given more to this country than you or I ever will. She stood, closing her tablet with a decisive snap. I'll be filing my report with National Headquarters. You'll be contacted regarding disciplinary proceedings. In the meantime, I suggest you figure out how you're going to make this right, Mr. Hastings, because right now you've created a public relations nightmare for every VFW post in the country. She walked out, leaving Derek sitting alone in the empty hall, the weight of his catastrophic mistake finally, fully, crushing down upon him. The news traveled fast. By noon, Tom Kowalski's phone was buzzing with messages from Post members who'd heard rumors about an Inspector General visit. By 2 o'clock, Marcus Webb had confirmation from his contact at the Department of Defense. Not only was Ray Mitchell legitimate, he was a legend in certain military circles. And by 3 o'clock, word had reached someone far more significant than anyone at Post 847 could have anticipated. General Howard Riggs, National Commander of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, was in his office at the VFW National Headquarters in Kansas City, Missouri, when his assistant buzzed him with an urgent call. Sir, I have Janet Rosario from Pennsylvania. She says it's critical. General Riggs, a decorated Vietnam veteran himself who'd served with the 101st Airborne, took the call immediately. He listened for 15 minutes without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each passing moment. When Rosario finished her report, Riggs was silent for a long beat. Then he said simply, "Get me the contact information for Ray Mitchell. Then clear my schedule for tomorrow. I'm flying to Pennsylvania." "Sir," his assistant said when he relayed the message, "your schedule is packed. You have meetings with—" "Cancel them," Riggs said, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of command. "All of them. If anyone asks why, tell them I'm going to personally apologize to a brother who deserved better from us." He hung up and sat back in his chair, rubbing his weathered face. Ray Mitchell. The name was familiar. Riggs had heard it whispered in certain circles over the years. The ghost operator. The man who'd volunteered for missions that had no right to succeed and somehow brought his team home alive more times than probability allowed. The man who'd refused every award ceremony, every public recognition, every attempt to turn his service into publicity. And some small-town post commander with an inflated ego had treated him like a criminal. Riggs picked up his phone and made another call, this one to the Pentagon, to a friend who worked in military personnel archives. "I need everything we can legally share about a former MACV-ESOG operator. Yes, I know most of it's still classified. Get me what you can. Names, Ray Mitchell. Served 66 to 70. I'll wait." The response came faster than expected. His friend's voice was hushed, almost reverent. "Howard, where did you hear that name?" "One of our posts." "Why?" "Because Ray Mitchell isn't just any MACV-ESOG operator. He's the last surviving member of Recon Team Python. You know what that means?" Riggs did know. Every Special Operations historian knew about Recon Team Python, one of the most successful and most tragic teams in MACV-ESOG history. 15 men had rotated through that team designation over 3 years. 14 of them were dead. Only one had made it home. "Send me everything," Riggs said quietly. "And I mean everything that's been declassified. I need to know exactly who we failed." Back in Millbrook, Ray Mitchell was doing exactly what he'd done every afternoon since arriving at his daughter's house, picking up his grandchildren from school. He stood outside Millbrook Middle School with the other parents and grandparents, waiting for the dismissal bell, his Vietnam veteran's cap pulled low against the autumn sun. Tyler spotted him first and came running, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. "Grandpa, guess what? I got an A on my history test." "That's my boy," Ray said, genuine pride warming his voice. "Your mom's gonna be real happy about that." Emma emerged more slowly, talking with her friends, but her face lit up when she saw Ray. She was at that age where showing affection to family in public wasn't cool, but she still grabbed his hand as they walked to the truck. "Can we get ice cream?" "Your mama said you needed to come straight home and start your homework." "But, Grandpa." "But," Ray continued with a slight smile, "she didn't say we couldn't stop for ice cream on the way home, long as the homework gets done, right?" The kids cheered, and for that moment, sitting in the truck with his grandchildren arguing about which flavor was best, Ray Mitchell felt at peace. This was what mattered. Not medals, not recognition, not the approval of strangers at a VFW hall. Just this, ordinary moments with the people he loved. He didn't know that at that very moment, his life was about to change dramatically. At VFW Post 847, Derek Hastings was sitting alone in his office, staring at his computer screen. He'd spent the past 3 hours researching Ray Mitchell, piecing together fragments of declassified information, memorial websites, and historical accounts. Each new piece of information was another hammer blow to his conscience. Ray Mitchell had been awarded the Medal of Honor for actions during a rescue mission in Cambodia in 1968. His team had been ambushed during an extraction, and he'd single-handedly held off an enemy force while wounded pilots were loaded onto a helicopter. He'd been shot twice, taken shrapnel from a grenade, and still managed to be the last man on the helicopter before it lifted off under heavy fire. The Distinguished Service Crosses had come from other operations, missions Derek could barely comprehend, deep penetration raids into North Vietnamese sanctuaries, prisoner rescues, intelligence gathering in territory where capture meant torture and execution. And through it all, Ray Mitchell had never sought attention, had never written a book, had never given paid speeches, had simply served, survived, and tried to live a quiet life. Derek's hands were shaking as he picked up his phone. He dialed Tom Kowalski's number. "Tom, it's Derek. Don't hang up, please."
There was silence on the line. Then, "I'm listening." "I just had a visit from the VFW Inspector General, and I've spent the past 3 hours learning exactly who Ray Mitchell is." Derek's voice cracked slightly. "Tom, I need his address. I need to apologize to him, in person, today." "Why should I give it to you?" Tom's voice was cold. "Because you were right when you said what happened last night wasn't who we're supposed to be. Because I was wrong, completely, horribly wrong, and I need to make it right. Please." Another long silence. Then, "He's staying with his daughter, Sarah Brenner, on Maple Avenue, number 247. But Derek, if you're going there to make yourself feel better, don't bother. That man doesn't owe you forgiveness." I know. At 5:30 that evening, Ray was helping Emma with her math homework at the kitchen table when the doorbell rang. Sarah, who had come home early for once, went to answer it. She opened the door to find a man in his early 40s, wearing a VFW polo shirt, standing on her porch with his hands clasped in front of him like a penitent. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed. "Can I help you?" Sarah asked, her voice neutral. "My name is Derek Hastings. I'm the commander of VFW Post 847. I'm here to speak with Ray Mitchell if he's willing to see me." Sarah's expression hardened immediately. "You're the one who kicked my father out." "Yes, ma'am, I am. And I was wrong. Completely, horribly wrong. I need to apologize to him." "He doesn't need your apology," Sarah said sharply. "He needs to be left alone." "Sarah?" Ray's voice came from behind her. He'd stood up from the kitchen table and moved to the doorway. "It's all right. I'll talk to him." "Dad, you don't have to." "I know," Ray said gently, putting a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "But it's okay." Ray stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind him. He and Derek stood there in the fading autumn light, two veterans, separated by generations and experience, but connected by service.
Derek couldn't meet Ray's eyes at first. "Mr. Mitchell, His voice broke. He tried again. "Sir, I owe you the most profound apology. What I did last night was inexcusable. I accused you of stolen valor when you're one of the most decorated veterans in this country. I questioned your honor when your service record puts mine to shame. I treated you with disrespect when you deserved nothing but gratitude and respect." Ray listened quietly, his expression unreadable. "I've spent today learning who you are," Derek continued, words tumbling out now. "What you did in Vietnam, the men you saved, the missions you completed, the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Crosses, He stopped, choking on emotion. "And you came to our post just wanting to be around other veterans. And I threw you out. I called you a fraud. I humiliated you in front of everyone." He finally looked up, and there were tears on his face. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, sir. I know that. But I'm asking for it anyway because I don't know what else to do." Ray was quiet for a long moment, studying the younger man's face. He saw genuine remorse there, genuine pain. He also saw what he'd seen the night before, a man struggling under pressure, a man who'd made a terrible mistake, but who at least was capable of recognizing it. "You know what the hardest thing about war is?" Ray said finally, his voice soft. "It's not the combat. It's not the fear or the pain. It's coming home and realizing that the people you fought for don't really understand what you gave up. And then, over time, you stop trying to make them understand. You just carry it alone." He paused, looking out at the quiet suburban street. "I came to your post because my daughter thought I needed to be around people who might understand that weight. People who'd carried their own version of it. I wasn't looking for glory or recognition. I just wanted to sit quietly in a room with other veterans and not feel so alone. Derek's tears were flowing freely now. I'm so sorry. I know you are. And I believe you. But son, you need to understand something. Your apology to me isn't what matters most. What matters is that you learn from this. You're a leader. You have men who look to you, who follow your example. Last night, you taught them that it's okay to judge quickly, to distrust, to dismiss people who don't fit your expectations. Ray stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. The real work isn't apologizing to me. It's going back to your post and teaching them something different. Teaching them that service looks different for everyone, that humility matters more than authority, that we owe each other the benefit of the doubt, especially when someone's asking to belong to something we love. Derek nodded, unable to speak. Now, Ray continued, I appreciate you coming here. I appreciate your apology, but I think you should go home to your family and I should get back to mine. My granddaughter has a math test tomorrow, and I promised I'd help her study. Will you, Derek managed to ask, will you consider reapplying to the post? We'd be honored to have you. I'd be honored. Ray smiled sadly. Let me think about it. Right now, I'm not sure I'm ready to go back there. Maybe someday. We'll see. Derek nodded, understanding that this was more grace than he deserved. Thank you, sir, for your service, for your sacrifice, and for, he gestured helplessly, for being a better man than I am. I'm not better. I've just lived longer and made different mistakes. You'll be all right, Derek Hastings. Just remember this feeling and do better next time. He turned and went back inside, leaving Derek standing on the porch as the last light faded from the sky, forever changed by 5 minutes with a man who'd spent his whole life trying to be invisible. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.